healing is irrational. It's in fact one of the most irrational things you're ever going to undertake in your life. You think healing is going to be logical, but it's not. There is nothing logical or orderly about healing. Why? Because healing requires forgiveness. The thing you have to bear in mind is life is a learning experience. There is never a moment when we're not learning on this planet. Bear in mind that many of the lessons we learn, many of them, look like they're painful. But in fact, they're the greatest blessing we could ever have in our life, absolutely ever had. And I'll share one of my favorite stories with you. I was doing a workshop in Amsterdam, and this gentleman who was in this workshop was in charge of taking me back to, I don't know, to the airport or something. I don't remember what it was. But you know how after you've taught a workshop and you've been on your feet for hours and days, whatever, the last thing you want to do is engage in a long conversation with someone. So I get in the car and he says, let me tell you about myself. And I'm like this, like, oh, please do. But actually, he told me one of the best stories I've ever had in the whole of my life on this planet. He says, let me tell you about my life. He said that he had 2 business partners. And the 3 of them owned 2 companies. One company was fairly useless, and the other one was the one they were in. So one day he goes to work, and his 2 partners outvoted him. They said, we've decided we don't want to work with you anymore. And so what they did was they said, you have a choice. You can either take all this stock in this worthless company, or you can take the equivalent of $35,000. And he said to me, all the stock in a worthless company, or $35,000. He said that 35 grand was not going to either get me out of debt or help me pay my bills, and then there's this. And he said he didn't know what to do. He was beside himself. So he goes home, and he wants to tell his wife, and he says, I got to talk to you. She says, I want to talk to you. I want a divorce, all in one day. All right? So everyone divorced him in one day, or announced their intention to divorce him. So he said to me, now I'm not a spiritual man, at least I wasn't then. And he said, but I finally stood back and I said, there's only one thing, one source that could mess up my life like this, and it had to be God. So he decides to say a prayer, and he says, if you're there and you have anything to do with this, talk to me. He has a dream. And in the dream, he sees himself as driving this car, and he's going over the Alps, and it's real icy and it's real snowy, and he's clinging to this car. He's got to hold on for dear life, but eventually he makes it over the top, and he drives down, and the road is beautiful, and it's dry, it's sunny, and he drives the car to a beautiful little house where there's a candle in the window and a meal waiting on the table inside. And from that, he deduces that he should take all the stock in this useless company because this is a cat food company, and he was driving a Jaguar. So he tells his partners that he wants the stock, and they said absolutely, and they're laughing because they think they've just saved themselves $35,000. Well, within 6 months to a year's time, he had this company turned around, and now he's one of the most generous entrepreneurs in Europe because it just simply exploded for him. And he met another life's partner, and he moved on. He's got a gorgeous marriage, and he has a beautiful life. But what he was able to do was not hold on to the wounds. Now, if he had done that, I don't believe, although you can't prove this, that his future would have ended up this way, because he'd still be saying, why did you do this to me? Instead, he said, all right, you did it to me, I'm out of here. All right? And he took his circuits of energy, and he just took off. Now, there's another thing I want to point out here that's really delicious to point out, and that's that when you heal, and in the healing process, you're going to recognize that healing requires a number of things. And we've talked about that. Healing requires, of course, paying attention to your wounds and going into forgiveness, etc. But it also requires honor. It requires a sense of personal honor. And I never realized that till I wrote the book Anatomy of the Spirit. I never realized the role that integrity and honor play in healing, especially with yourself. If you give your word to yourself, you've got to keep it. Don't negotiate your honor, because you know what? It affects your immune system, it affects your biology, and I'm not kidding you. So, how does one forgive? And how do you manage yourself and your healing? I'll tell you when we return. Thank you.